Hello guys, Bellados 3D here, and this is the second part of my follow along video of myself recording making a stone well. In the first episode we watched me create a high detail mesh, not a high poly but a higher detail mesh, and in this episode I will be making the low poly mesh ready for the normals to be baked and painting in next episode. Okay, let's get on with this. Right, this is our original high detail model here, and what we need to do is we need to take a low poly model which covers the major geometry of this model. There are certain parts of this the high poly model I can separate off, making duplicates of, and I can use in the low poly, so I don't have to do it all, but it's mainly things like this area here where I've created the rope and the brickwork that I need to create low poly versions of. So let's get started. First things first, let's put my screen capture keys on if they are going to work on the left hand side there, and all my keys should show up there in the bottom left corner. Okay, so close that menu, press Shift and A to bring up the add menu, and we will add a cylinder. Oh, we don't want it all the way over there. I'm going to delete that again, and I'm going to press Shift C, which will reset the cursor. So I can now press Shift A and hit the cylinder to bring the cylinder back in. Obviously we don't want this many faces on it. It's got 32 faces at the moment. That's a little bit high, so we can easily knock that down to half and give it 16 faces. Right click, shade smooth. Okay, now we'll go into edit mode, press 1 on the numpad to bring it into forward facing, and we will press G and then Z to bring it up by 1 unit. That's now level with the base of the other model. If I press 3, it will go into face mode, and I'll select the top face, back into the front orthographic mode, and press GZ to bring it down. And we just want that just covering the top of the well there, just above it. And if I then press, go back into front orthographic, if I press S for scale, and then I press Shift Z, which locks it so that it doesn't go up and down. It would help if I actually had everything selected. So I press A to select everything, press press S, and then Shift Z, and it will just scale it down in the X and Y axis. So we just want to get that just covering that top piece of geometry there. Okay, now what we want to do is if I press Alt and Z, I'll be able to see through it, and I can press Control and R to do a loop cut, and we can bring that up to the bottom of there. Oh, and look, the screencast keys are hidden behind that, so I'm just going to switch them over to the right, even though it says left. Okay, we're going to put another loop cut in with the Control R, and we're going to bring that down to the bottom right there. So now we'll come out of the see-through mode there. If I press 3 to go back into face mode, if I press the Alt button and I click on any of these lines going up and down, it will select the whole loop going around. So now I can press E and then right click to set, and then press Shift and S to scale and Shift Z to restrict the axis. I can then scale that section in there, and to make it a bit slower on the scale I can press the Shift button to fine tune it, and we just want it just about covering, so about there should do it. Now you can't see it because the model's in there, but there is a row of faces all the way around the bottom here. If we press the Alt button and try to find that, there we go. We can now S to scale again, Shift Z, hold the Shift down and scale it out. So we now have the basic shape for the outside now of this. Now we'll select the top face, insert, and we'll bring that insert in. Again, I want to see through the mesh so that I can see where it's going. Can't see that very well, so if I do Shift Z for the wireframe, it's very difficult to see. It should be about go Shift Z back. Now if I press extrude and bring it down, I should be able to bring it down to the level of the first lot of bricks, and Shift Alt select, we'll select that loop there, and scale Shift Z. We'll try and bring that there. Okay, now if we press extrude again and we bring that down, it doesn't need to go all the way, but it needs to get there eventually. And now I can't see the inside faces there because of the but I'm going to delete this face by pressing X and F to delete face. I'm going to delete the bottom face. Right, and now I should be able to select, if I press Shift Z, if I can select these with the Alt and left click, and then I can go E, press right to set it, and then we'll S to scale again, Shift Z, and bring it in just about there. Okay, the whole of the base of the well is now covered. The last thing I want to do is just to help to, as you can see, it's smooth shaded, so everything's, the shading looks off because it's smooth shaded and it doesn't know how to handle the edges and the creases. So simple way to deal with that, because we're going to be baking the high poly geometry on that, is just to give it a quick bevel around the edges. So press 2 to go into edge select, Alt and click, then Shift Alt and click each of the edges. And then we just want to press Control and V and then Shift and just bring them edges out slightly. You can scroll up to add extra loops. As you can see, it then sorts itself out. Okay, so that's the major part of the base that we've done. What I want to do now is we'll back in object mode. We'll go back into the base model, high poly model, I'm going to use all of this geometry up here, a copy of it, as my low poly mesh, because it's as low poly as it needs to be. So if I hover the cursor over any part, I press L, that will select the whole of that linked part. So just go through and we will copy all of the linked parts there, 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 there. Oh, there. And we will press Shift D, which will create a copy of that geometry. Press right to set that into place. If I press G now, it still moves. It's still separate, but it's in the same object, so I need to get it out of that object. So by pressing, with it selected, pressing P, I can then separate by selection. So now you'll find that if we go back into object mode by pressing Tab, we have got a separate copy right there. And what we can do is we'll highlight that one, and then we'll left click the low. What I'm going to do is, to make this easier, I'm going to click on the high poly and I'm going to hide that for now. So if I click on the first part and then click on the base and press Ctrl J, that now joins them into a single mesh. Okay, now let's bring back the high poly model. We need to create a low poly version of this section here, the handle and the bars. So again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into the high poly mode, high poly model, go into edit mode, and I'm going to select with the L button all of this geometry here. And then if I press Shift and S, I can then choose cursor selected to bring the 3D cursor into the center of that. So now when I create, go back into object mode and I press Shift A and create a cylinder, it will be centered exactly on that piece. Now for a small piece like that, we don't need this much geometry. I can knock that down to 10. 10 should be enough. Right click that, shade smooth as per usual. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to delete the end caps because I'm not going to use the end caps. I'll be using a different method. Okay, and select the whole thing. I need to rotate it so it's running along that bar. So I will rotate by pressing R and then pressing the Y button to constrict it to the Y axis, and then type 90, turn it around. Now if I press S, I can scale all the way down. I can press the delete button on the numpad to zoom in. I'll just bring it down so it's just covering that geometry. I can then press S to scale and press the X button to scale only on the X axis and bring it across. Okay. So what I also need now is to fill these end caps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge select mode by pressing 2, press Alt and left click on that loop there, which then selects the whole loop all the way around the edge. And if I press Shift Alt and click on that one, we'll click that too. So again, we're going to extrude by pressing the E button, and then as you can see, it's extruded. Right click to set it back down, and then I'm going to scale on the X just a tiny little bit. And then I'm going to do the same again, press the E, right click, and then I'm going to S, excluding the X axis by pressing Shift X. Oops, let's try that again. Press the mouse button too quickly. So S, excluding the X, and bring it in so that it's just inside the geometry there. Now this should copy all the geometry from the previous, when I bake the normal, should copy the geometry from the high poly mesh onto this mesh But what I am going to do, just to be sure, that it carries over, I'm going to go into front orthographic mode. We'll put it into the X-ray mode. I'm just going to put a few loop cuts in there. I know that's not extremely low poly, but it's low poly enough, just to give it a bit of extra geometry. And then press Ctrl B and drag it down and make sure I've got loops in there. So I can now go back to solid. I can now press Ctrl and minus on the keyboard, press S to scale, exclude the X-axis with Shift X and just scale it in a little bit. And that should then be enough geometry there for the normals to carry over properly. Okay, so now we're back into edit mode. We're going to add another cylinder. Again, the same 10 vertices should be enough. I don't need these end caps, so I select the end caps and press X and then F to delete the faces, L to select the whole of that piece of geometry, and RY90 to scale it round. So I'm going to scale that down, all the way down, all the way. Now notice the for some reason the 3D cursor has moved, so I'm going to delete that. I have no idea why that's moved. I don't recall moving it, but it would seem that I did. So if I select that and I press S, Shift S, cursor selected. Now we can try that again. Cylinder, select the top face, select the top and bottom face, delete them. Go back into object mode, right click, shade smooth, just to make it look better. So RY90, go into the front again, and we'll zoom down. That's better, it's now in line. So S to scale, Shift X to restrict. Sorry, no, we don't want to restrict it. Let's escape out of that. We want Shift to S to scale, and then on the X-axis only, bring it all the way across to about there. And for some reason that does not appear to be dead center, which is strange. Anyway, so if I go into edge mode and alt click that edge, I can then G, X, bring that out. Very strange that, but I suppose that's the way it is. Okay, now if I select all of that, if I press S to scale and exclude the S-axis, X-axis, we can bring that down so it's just above the surface of that. So what I want to do is to make it easier, I want to use a mirror so that I can then create this geometry on one side and it will copy to this side, and then we'll apply the mirror and I can add the extra geometry later. So obviously I don't want to do this while I'm inside the same mesh as other objects that don't need mirroring. So I will now, with the cylinder selected, press P, selection, and come out of that. And then if we click on the new object, we can go in, we can put an edge loop slap bang in the middle, press 3 for face mode, alt select across there, delete them faces. Now we go back out into object mode. I'm going to hide that for now and that for now, because I now need to make the mirror No, I don't. I'm a fool. Right. So with... Oh, come on. There it is. With that selected, I can then go to the modifiers tab, click add modifier and add a mirror. This will mirror it on the x-axis, but it's not quite right because if you can see, they're not meeting in the center. Turn clipping on, and the reason they're not meeting in the center is because the origin point is here. So what I want to do, the easiest way to do this would be if you look in the mirror modifier, you see mirror object, you can click the little pipette and then click on that, and there you see it's now mirroring around that other object, so it's perfectly lined up. Right, now if we go back into edit mode, go into edge mode, select those two edges right there, I can now start extruding and scaling so that we can cover this geometry here. So if we press E to extrude and right click to set and then S to scale, you can see the line going up, going up, going up, and that should be right. Press E to extrude and press X on the x-axis, and that will move that along the x-axis. Okay, and then as you can see, that's moved that forward. Press E to extrude, press the right mouse button to set it, and S to scale it in towards the middle so that it covers the other geometry. And again, E on the x-axis, bring it out, E to scale, right click to set, scale it in. Oh, excuse me. E, right click, GX. Okay, and then the final piece is E to scale, right click, and S to bring it in. I can then press M and to bring it in the center. So now you can see, if I get rid of this high poly model, you can see that's now copied. Oh, excuse me again. Copied across. So if I go back into edit mode, just need to put a few bevels into this, just to make it look nice, make it look pretty. Control B for a bevel and bring it up. There we go. Okay, now I need to add geometry just to this end. Obviously, because it's mirroring, it won't do that, it will copy it to the other side. So I need to hover over this window and press Control A, and that applies the modifier. Now it is pure geometry now. So let's bring back, is that the high poly? Yes, that's the high poly. We'll bring back the high poly model, just so I can see where I'm supposed to be with it. If I press 3 and I press C to circle select, I can then, nope. Okay, let's hide the high poly model again. Alright, let's C to circle select and select that. Control plus, and I'm just going to bring that out a little bit further on the x-axis, and then bring back the cube, the original. It's a bit difficult to see. Let's hide that again. Right, and just delete them faces off of there. Press 2 for edge, and nope, that ring there. And if we go into back, and then we E to extrude, right click to set, scale it back up, bring it back up there, E to extrude, X for the X axis, bring it on there, then E to extrude, right click to set, scale it down, might have to turn it around to look at this, and bring it into there, and then E to extrude, X on the X axis, bring it in, and again E to extrude, right click, and then press M and center. Now the whole of that is covered. Okay, so now what do we have on the low poly model? We'll hide the high poly and we'll bring back in all the low poly. Okay, we're almost done. Just a few more pieces to do, and then we can unwrap it and get ready to for the next lesson, for the next part. So we need to bevel these edges, don't we? Just these edges here. Control B, just to sharpen them up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go into face mode. I'm going to select that loop there, press Shift S, cursor to selected. Bring back the high poly model, going into object mode, press Shift A and create a cube. Woo, huge. Go into edit mode and we're going to scale that right down. All the way down. Oopsie. And zoom into that. Okay, so we need to bring it in on the X axis. Right there. We just want to again trace the outside edges of the high poly model. So scale on the Y, bring that in just there. We want to bring G and then Z to bring that up to the top, just about there. And then select the bottom face, and G to the Z, bring it down to about there. Now I want to get this curve in. We'll put in 2 edge loops there, and then we'll press S and Z and scale on the Z axis just to bring them out. Now if we go to face mode and select that face and that face, S to the Z, bring it. So we've now got that covering there. Back into edge mode. Let's select all of these edges. Oops. Select all of these edges. And then we press Control B. Just bevel it out slightly. Okay, it's not shade smooth, so get that shade smooth. Excellent. Right, so again we need another cylinder. We'll go into the high poly model and we will select this loop here, press S, cursor selected, and we'll go back out, go back into the low poly one there, and we will create, you got it, another cylinder. Again, we're going to delete faces, we don't need them just yet. Right. Okay. Select all of that, RY90, and we can leave it at 10 faces as it was, and scale it all the way down there. I've no idea what that geometry in the middle is there. I again don't know. Don't know what's happened there. Let's. Oh dear, what a wally! I've got the whole thing selected, haven't I? Let's see. Okay, just press L to select that one item. See how easy it is to accidentally have more geometry selected than you need. And we'll zoom that into there. There we go. And we'll scale that all the way down so it's just covering. And Shift S to scale on the X axis and bring it out. And finally, just go into edge mode, select that edge, press E, right click, M at center, and then select that edge and just give it a little bevel. And then once we're back out into edge, into object mode, hit shade smooth. So we now have almost all of our geometry covered. It's not quite covering there, but I think that will be alright because, yeah, that'll be alright. It doesn't matter if it's slightly poking out. So let's just hide that off and see what we're missing. Okay, we're missing that, so we need to go into there and we'll bring that back as a reference. I need another cylinder right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into high poly mode and we will select all around the edges there. Shift S, cursor selected. Very useful tool, that 3D cursor. Go back out and we will select that. In edit mode, add another cylinder. This one doesn't need to be anywhere near as detailed as the rest, so I'm just going to use 6 vertices on this one. And again, we don't need the top and bottom. So this is going to be so small. It's going to be so small that it doesn't need to be. And we just fine tune that in with scale. Just about hits there, and then we'll bring it up. So, there we go. And there we go, that's the whole of the geometry covered with a low poly version. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide this high poly version for now. And as you can see, there's only 4,358 tries in that whole low poly model. But if I hide all of that and I bring back my high poly model, as you can see, there's 65,000 tries in that. So that's a hell of a difference, and it won't reduce the quality of the model too much, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this geometry, I'm going to convert it into a normal map and apply it onto all of this geometry. So instead of having physical geometry for the bumps and grooves, it'll be a normal map simulating it, and it should hopefully, fingers crossed, look very much the same. Okay, So we've now got two final things to do. Firstly, I want to mark all the seams so that they can, and UV unwrap so that is ready for UV unwrapping. Actually, no, I'm going to do that as part of part 3 because this is now running into 35 minutes. So in part 3, I'll be UV unwrapping, exporting, and then baking and painting in Substance Painter. Thanks a lot for listening along to this. Hope I didn't ramble too much, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, and want to see more content like this, then make sure you hit the like and subscribe and ring that bell. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you in the next one.